Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. And I have Noah today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Noa Chang. I read stuff, write stuff, make stuff, draw stuff, and prodigious at procrastinating on doing all four of those things. And I'm just so happy to be here.
Woo! So we went to CalArts together. Um,
Mhm.
and I feel like you hacked CalArts better than I did. But I'd like to hear about your sort of personal journey becoming an artist and when you realized like design is what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think so. The context here is that my dad also went into graphic design.
Oh, cool.
Um, he teaches down in a small university in La Mirada. And so I'd always kind of grown up with art in the periphery, sort of like going to galleries and throughout high school doing all of those. I came very much from the like, oh, if you're gonna do this art thing, let's do the art thing. So all the like high school, like summer programs at CalArts and Otis and like Chicago, like I did the whole thing very much in the mode of like, oh, I'm going to be a fine artist.
Oh,
Like I had been developing this practice of like installations and like interactive sculpture. And I was around 15 or 16, ended up going to a retrospective of Karita Kent's down at the Karita Kent Center, who we both love. And I something clicked when I was just sort of interacting with the prints. And I kind of went like, ooh, this graphic design thing. Um, and it wasn't really until I was sort of like in my senior year and was applying, because I was applying for illustration to different schools, but also applying for like English, because I had this idea that I was going to be a writer, and CalArts came up as like a really great school for graphic design, and I went, yeah, this is also something that I'm really interested in. I think the sort of cerebral and systematic nature of making when it comes to like design was something that clicked with me. And the rest is history, and this is my life now.
so you were born to be an artist and you became one, is
Born to be an
basically
artist, destined to be a designer.
put it on a t-shirt. Um, I think Karita Kent is maybe a great entry point into this conversation. Karita Kent taught at Immaculate Heart College for those viewing this. I went to Immaculate Heart High School, which is like the remnants of the property. They sold Immaculate Heart College to what is now the American Film Institute, so it doesn't exist anymore. But all of Karita Kent's work is like still at IMAC, and so it's like on the walls everywhere. And her ethos is why I started this program, basically, because I was like, I might not be able to be a professor at a university, but I can certainly have my own spin on education and make it more accessible. And pretty much my entire philosophy is from her and from Kurt Vonnegut when it comes to making art. So it's really nice to have you as a guest. Maybe you can talk about like how you personally understand art and design as interacting, because I think a lot of people would view Karita's work as fine art, even though you're right, it's all photography and graphic design. But maybe that's just we're drawn to the kind of highfalutin form of graphic design that is fine art versus like more commercial advertising.
Yeah, I remember the first year of CalArts. Um, I had Scott Zakowski as my sort of primary instructor. Very sweet man. I love him to death. But his refrain was always like, design is not art, and art is not design, and they are two mutually exclusive categories. Um, and I did totally buy into that for a long time of like, no, yeah, they're different. And then people would say why, and I would say cause they just kind of are. um I do think there is something like sort of like there's a phenomenology to like art and a phenomenology to design, where we perceive them as different things, but it's really hard, yeah, to articulate what that is, because there are like Karita Kent fine artists whose practice is very rooted, seems very rooted in like design language, and then people like, I honestly I would say like Ed Fella, who are like very prominent graphic designers, but their practice, it just feels a lot more fluid and almost like an artist's.
Yeah.
Um, it's a conversation that, and honestly, it was something that I was considering like writing an article about for the website. This like weird line that we sort of walk. I think my current philosophy is like art and design are different depending on whether or not you want them to be.
Yeah.
And the actual distinction is so unimportant. As long as you're enjoying what you're doing, like it is what it is.
Yeah. I think, well, my personal philosophy is like very anarchic, which is like art is a social construct that we came up with. Design is a social construct that we came up with. Any difference or similarity between the two is also social and fluid and historical. And as rigorous as certain like design history classes might be, it seems almost pointless unless you're talking about like a specific piece of work that you're making and like whether you want it to be more artistic or more design oriented, like if you're solving a problem or whatever. Because when I think of like Warhol or Creed Kent, like their aesthetic is graphic design, but they're perceived as fine art versus Ed Fella, who I think his work is perceived as fine art because because it looks, it's an aesthetic thing. Like his stuff is more illustration, it's more like image based. There's like the Jeff McFetridge slash Ed Fella book that came out
Mm-hmm.
that was like comparing their work. Um, and I think it's really interesting because the main people who sort of talk about this are designers and everyone else just doesn't care really. Um, so I'm sort of wondering how you developed your own personal interest in like um, the kinds of work that you like and how you sort of became the kind of artist or designer that you are. That's a big
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry. That's like, hey, give me your whole life story.
Yeah, let me just like peer through the infinite reflections of my past. I think that I think that when it comes to like my own practice, like you're right, it's all a matter of like how we constructed definitions or like attitude, not even a definition because you can't articulate it. It's just like an attitude that we have towards a certain kind of practice.
Yeah.
Um, and it was something that I always, it's something that honestly I didn't realize, that didn't super, I feel, click until I graduated,
Mhm.
which is that um like what we view as art and design and what we view as like the right way to do or the wrong way to do things, which is very much like a part of the way that I felt I was taught design at CalArts, which is like, hey, this is how, this is the structure that you abide to, that is graphic design.
Yeah.
um but it's one of those things where it's like what you see and what you learn throughout your practice and throughout your education, those aren't right ways to do things. They are a ways to do things to get the like result that you are looking at right now in the reference of whatever it is that like you're trying to replicate. And that's valuable and good insofar as like it expands your media literacy and informs your practice more. But if you consider those things as like right ways to do things, then you start to take on this attitude where you're moving through your practice and you're moving through your education kind of in the mode of replication.
Mm,
And that isn't constructive to your practice as like someone who wants to make cool and original work.
right.
Um, and so you need to, I don't know, you need to make the thing that you've never seen before. And it's probably going to look terrible. And isn't that kind of awesome that it looks like shit? And then the next time you do it, it looks a little bit less like shit.
Right.
And then you just build up what you do from there and take what you see and what you learn as things that you see and learn and not things that you have to be or do.
Yeah. I always found it frustrating but interesting that like every professor, even though they all sort of ascribed to like a similar general philosophy, had such different like interests or pieces of advice. Like you could go to someone for something and they'd be like, oh, don't do it this way, that looks terrible, and then someone else might really like it. And same thing with all of the classmates. It's like, you know, you would have competing interpretations of critique from different students, which is sometimes nice, but then also can feel really stressful when you're in it and you're like trying to learn. You want some sort of objective truth so that you can get objectively better at the thing you're doing, but then you're just, everything comes down to like personal opinions of the viewers. And so it's like entertaining that balance when you're in your teens or in your early 20s can be difficult when you're just like making it in the world of design. I'm wondering how
Yeah.
you navigated that because you did the undergrad program, which I'm sure was like very like had a very strong effect on you.
Yeah. I think that what you said is totally right. And I also think that it's a thing that happens, in my opinion, as a result of like public education,
Mm,
where we start to, from a very young age, view the idea of education and curriculum as something that's very deep personal.
yeah.
Um, that it's like, oh, the school board said that we have to learn this, 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 and this. And so the teacher's sort of reading a script, and you pick up this information that then becomes a monolithic truth about the world as you move through like your high school career. Um, and then you enter a place like CalArts or enter any college. And the big thing becomes like, yeah, each instructor that you take is going to have their very own spin on how they perceive their work, because that's what makes them good educators, is that they have this like breadth of experience as a unit and as like a collective faculty
Yeah.
that you can sort of draw from, um, which is really valuable in terms of, if you can see that and then understand for yourself that like, oh, that means that like the advice that I'm gathering is incredibly personal, which means that my opinions on my practice also are allowed to be just as personal as that. um, and then that will start to sort of fall apart when you have this perception of like, no, the things that I'm learning are objective truths about the world and art and design, um, and then fall back into that like cycle that we're talking about.
Yeah. I always sort of gave myself the advice that you should take critique to heart, but not take it personally.
Mm,
I think was
mm-hmm.
like the hardest. I'm very sensitive. It was the hardest thing for me to learn at grad school. It's like, everyone is shitting on your work. And like when you have a personal attachment to the stuff you're making, it's initially very difficult to like separate that and to not take everything really personally and be sad all the time. And I don't know. I think I've learned that lesson. I'm not quite great at it yet. Um, but it's hard.
Yeah,
It's
critical distance is a tricky thing to figure out, because I feel, yeah, I definitely ran into that same thing where it's like, oh, you think my work is bad? Am I am I bad?
my bad.
Am I bad? Oh my God, I made a mistake. I
Well,
should never have done this.
it's hard too because you're supposed to derive pride when you do something right. And so it's
Right.
hard to find the balance when you're like connected to your work only when it's good and like
Hmm.
feel the good feelings, but then also have the critical distance to be like, oh, if someone doesn't like something, I should fix it, but it shouldn't affect my mental health. Um, that's just one of the joys of art school. I was
Yeah.
wondering what sort of other, um, what are some life lessons that you learned going through the process of going to CalArts and now having a little bit of distance from it?
Yeah. Having graduated from CalArts and sort of looking back, I I wish that I had taken a little bit more advantage of like the space that you're given when you're learning, which isn't something that like is restricted to school. Like that's something that you can do whenever you want. That's the point of this whole thing, is like education is always and it's constant. Um, I think the thing that I wish I had taken to heart when I was in school, there's this quote from Ira Glass. There's like famous quote, which I think was paraphrased by Gabrielle Zevin. But like there's a point in every young artist's career where their taste will exceed their talent, meaning that when you start out, if you're lucky, you'll look at almost everything you make and think it's terrible because you don't have technical skill yet, and that's fine,
Yeah.
but you know what it is that you're trying to make. So you have a much more refined body of creativity in your head, and that's something that should encourage you. all that has to happen is practicing until your hands catch up.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to train your skill than it is to train your eye. And so I wish that I had understood, and I wish that more people understand
Yeah.
that it's like okay to suck and it's good to suck. And you have to give yourself space to challenge your practice and be critical of your work and even be bad at what you do without that meaning that you're a bad artist.
Yeah. I think almost everything I look back and I don't like what I created. And I think in pretty much every episode, the conclusion has been it's a good thing to fail, and experiments imply failure. And if you were just successful at everything you did, you wouldn't really learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you said about how learning is a constant thing, and that, we're students until we die. We're students of Earth until we die.
Oh
Every
yeah.
day you're learning something about the world and people and how to be a better person, hopefully. Some people, not so much. But in general, I think life's purpose is sort of to like, the Kurt Vonnegut quote that's like, his son said, "We're here to help each other through this thing, whatever it is." And I think the arts are like very critically tied to making sense of life and making it more bearable and more beautiful. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your personal practice, and the work you do, to give kind of context. Or maybe you're in a period where you don't know and you're figuring it out.
I'm formally, I think I'm in a period where I'm like, where I don't super know where I'm taking my individual career. Um, a large part of that is that federal student loans resume payments in October. And I'm like, okay, honestly, put your shit on the side. We're gonna hustle for now.
Yeah, seriously.
um, but I think right now I'm in a spot where I'm just trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about developing my sort of internal perspective on things.
Hmm.
Um, the opportunity to like work on whatever side projects I have has been great. Um, I'm actually gonna be going back into academia. I'll be teaching a class at Otis in the fall.
Oh my
Um,
God, congratulations.
yeah,
That's so exciting.
co-teaching with Stephanie Sabo and Roman Jaster, who we both know.
Amazing.
It's a typography class for illustration majors. So I'm like, oh, okay, that shit's incredibly up my alley.
That's so fun. Oh my God. So is it like how to do type for like storybooks and like posters and things mostly?
It's not so much a lettering class as much as it is a like, this is like typography one. Like this is how
Okay.
typography works, constructing letter forms. Um, but sort of in talking to Roman and Stephanie about the class, the thing was like, these are going to be illustration majors who are like their major is about form and it's about drawing and draftsmanship, and then let's take that aspect of like a student's experience and then apply that to the sort of systematic making of design.
Yeah.
I'm very much into like the way that design language and design thinking intersects with other things in this like weird beautiful spider web. And so I'm sort of like pursuing these different like ways of thinking and like navigating how I process my own practice. Um, a constant student of life until I die. The
That's
great thing is that I don't have to pay tuition to life. Uh,
You're done, unless you do a
yeah,
PhD in which they pay you, or you could
yeah,
do a second
right.
MFA, but I don't think you want to do that. Yeah, I TA'd the Photoshop Illustrator class for art majors at
Mm-hmm.
CalArts, and it is so interesting to see people who are so good at painting or drawing try to learn like some other adjacent technical skill like InDesign and just be like, what the fuck is happening? And it's so interesting because I think when you say you're an artist, people have like a kind of like general assumption about what that means, and maybe it's like a set
Mm-hmm.
of different things. But like there are so many, like you said, like it's a spider web of like different skills, and you just pick the ones that you're personally interested in and the ones that you want to pursue and get better at. And I think that's kind of the great thing about going to a school like CalArts that has so many different, or Otis, or like, any other school that has a great art program where you can like sponge different departments and like different things that you're interested in. And I just think that makes you a more well-rounded student. So that's really cool that
Yeah.
you're getting to teach that class. Are you excited?
Oh, I'm so excited. Terrified also, but more so excited. Um,
Fine. You have nothing
I'll
to be
be
afraid of.
fine.
They're
But
more, they're
yeah,
like spiders. They're more afraid of you than you are of them, you
there
know.
we go. Is that spiders or snakes? I
I
don't want to get bit either way. So
Yeah, I'm super afraid of spiders, so it's definitely not true advice for me. Um,
I I hate anything who I can see its teeth.
yeah.
And it's fucked up that spiders, you can do that with spiders. But
Okay.
I like what you were saying about the like teaching a class about design to non-designers is like the assumption is that it's going to met with like confusion and maybe even a little bit suspicion
Yeah.
of like, what is this? This feels, I don't want to make a logo.
Right.
Because with other art forms, it's all about the form. It's all about the shape that it takes. And with design, more often than not, the most outward facing forms and shapes that design takes is like branding
Yeah.
or a poster or a this or a that. I think that like personally that design is the medium of design isn't vectors or like PDFs or like even it's not even type.
Yeah.
The medium of design is like the thinking behind it and the system and the communication. And so you can absolutely weaponize that idea into making a really refined fine arts practice as much as you can use it to like create a very successful career for yourself as like a corporate designer
Yeah.
or any other type of like graphic designer that like whose career that you want to pursue.
So you think it's more about the systems in the organization than it is about the various forms that design has traditionally taken in America or
Yeah,
wherever else in the last couple
I
hundred years.
think especially after like postmodernism and like in the fine art space too, like you get these things of like, oh yeah, I saw a Rauschenberg exhibit and he put a bunch of pennies in a toaster and that's art, I guess.
Right.
But it's like, no, it's not about the form that it takes, it's about the thinking that went behind it and how it's like communicating an idea.
There can be
um,
bullshit ideas too.
and there can be
I'll throw that
absolutely be
out.
bullshit ideas. I went to a museum the other day and there was like, hey, we got like a 2x4 and painted it red and leaned it against the wall. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I can see where you went with this. Also, I guarantee you this thing is selling for 6 or 7 figures.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's infuriating.
you take it
Yeah.
or leave it and you do what's fun, I guess.
I think that's, and maybe this is a larger discussion for an article for one of us to write, but I think the arts kind of get a bad rap because there is so much bullshit. And like,
Right.
it's so hard to be an advocate for the field when you're like, no, I like care about like the truth and the beauty and the power of art and design. And like, we want to separate ourselves from people like that who are just trying to make money off of like naive people, stupid ideas, and money laundering for rich people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, it's all part of the same bag. And it's like very hard to get through to people who are like not interested in art or like only tangentially related to it. But that's one of the hills I just have to die on, and I'll do it.
Yeah, you get into
Um,
this weird space sinking enough into like the fine arts and gallery world where
yeah,
you're like, oh, this is the stock market. Like
right.
yeah, Art Basel, you mean Florida Wall Street? I don't.
Exactly. And I think that's why a lot of people are more drawn to graphic design because it's like safer and like a lot more um, standardized in a lot of ways. But I also think
Mm,
that tends to make experimentation harder in graphic design. I think people are like a lot less willing to take risks in general, at least like major corporations. I think it's this weird time that we live in where you see brands like McDonald's do like the grimace shake like shit, and then like you have TikTok influencers who are like paid by McDonald's to like do crazy things. And maybe that's also a result of being in the postmodern era where just like sort of all norms are out the window. Um, but it also feels like it's really hard to make sense of the world of design.
yeah, it's a fucked up time. It's a fucked up time to try and find meaning, but I mean that's our job.
Oh God, there is no meaning.
There,
It's
yeah, and
in our
hey, isn't
peace
that also a
mind.
lesson?
Yeah. No, I think like not taking shit serious. One of the rules on my wall somewhere in the orange poster says don't take shit seriously.
Yeah.
which is useful given that my final review, one of the comments was, "You're not taking this seriously," and I wanted to be like, "That's the point."
Good.
Except I was taking it seriously, and I was like, "Wow, people just think I'm a clown," which I guess I am. I'm wondering, like, you are. I think a personal opinion of mine is some of the best teachers are the ones who have just exited the educational system that they have been in. And I'm wondering, sort of like, as a young professor, what your kind of opinions are about like rejoining the educational space in academia, and whether like you think you can do good, or you're hesitant about the university space, or like sort of like anything that's coming to mind as you're starting on this journey.
Yeah. First of all, please don't call me professor. It sounds, I was talking to one of my friends and I told them that I might be teaching and they called me Professor Chang and I went, never do that again.
That's what people are gonna do though.
No, not, I mean, like at art school, we never called our instructors professor, whatever, whatever.
Yeah,
It's first name basis all the time. And
that's
the
stellar.
idea, the idea of applying like an honorific to me feels so just wildly. And I think that's part of it too, is
You don't
that
want to be Mr. Keaty?
I don't want to be Mr. Keaty. Mr. Keaty has a very, very singular brand, and I respect that for him, and I don't want it.
Stellar.
um,
No
but
suits,
well, sorry, go ahead.
no suits for you.
No suits for me. I can't do, I get too hot. I run hot. Um, but I do think like thinking about moving back into educational space as someone who just left, like it's a thought that I was having like earlier this week while thinking about it, is that my my primary role is going to be like, okay, how good of an advocate can I be for students? As someone who was a student like a year and 3 months ago. Um, I think there's an understanding and like a common vernacular
Mhm.
when interacting with like someone who also has to like stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning to finish like the number of iterations they need for an assignment.
Right.
Um, and I think it's so much about teaching is, I mean, not even so much about teaching. All of teaching is about communication.
Yeah.
And it's really valuable to be able to be in a space and know that you can offer that in a very meaningful way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of, I don't know. I'm I did speech and debate coaching when I was straight out of high school, so all throughout college and a little after. So I was like very close to the age of my students, and so being able to relate to them was really important. And now that I'm older and I don't do that anymore, I've realized like being close to the students and their mindsets is always going to help you like educate them better. And like part of the balancing act of being a teacher is like accumulating enough wisdom to like have people listen to you and take you seriously, or like view that they can get something out of you and that you can help them, and that kind of trust. But at the same time, like being flexible enough to be in their shoes and not getting too old in your mindset that like you're disjointed from them or you look down on them in some way. And I think that's like a very hard balancing act to have, and also part of the reason I wanted to have my school be like this, where it's like totally communal, everyone's ideas matter. I'm learning as much as I'm teaching. I'm learning more than I'm teaching because I'm interviewing everyone and learning about their backgrounds. So I think that's really cool that you're getting to start teaching so young, and kind of like accumulate these experiences so that you can help people. And it sounds like your ethics are coming from the right place, which is
Oh.
not surprising given who you are. Um, what are some things you're nervous about? Because you said you were nervous about starting.
Well, there's definitely an aspect of like teaching a first class where I'm like, okay, I've been on like the facing the wall side of like the class crit. I haven't been on the like back to the wall pointing at the artwork side of the crit. Um,
It's
so there's
easier.
like, yeah, there's like, I don't know, there's technical stuff there of like, okay, let's navigate a classroom that like I'm unfamiliar with. I taught at the writing center while we were in school. For the majority of my time there, that was my on-campus job. And so I know how to teach. I just teaching to like a student body is something that's going to be a new experience. And then along with that, something that I, also experienced at the Writing Center, which is like I'm going to be going into a classroom, and part of my value as someone who just came out of school is going to be being able to be a great advocate for students.
Yeah,
The other part of that is going to be, hey, I'm teaching a class to you and I'm like 1.5 to 2 years older than you.
exactly. Yeah.
Not that like work experience has as much to do with your ability to teach as people think. I think that a lot of people who have great careers don't make great teachers. And I think that a lot of people who are fantastic creatures or fantastic teachers,
And
fantastic creatures too. Like they don't need to have like written the book on whatever subject. It's communication and it's respect all the way, which applies to every like dynamic of like managers and employees, of parents and kids, teachers and students, of not letting yourself get so far removed from the experience of the person that you're interacting with that you end up placing them in a position where they don't feel comfortable presenting themselves and their ideas in a way that is meaningful to them.
yeah, wow, that's a very good quote and something to keep in mind. I do appreciate that our generation cares a lot more about um, people's mental health and personal experiences. Like some of the other teachers that I've interviewed, other professors I've interviewed for this have focused a lot on how education is a very like public and emotional experience, and that like meeting the students where they are. Not that it's a uniquely our generational thing, but I think we're so much more aware of it now, partially because of COVID, partially because of just the political climate, the social climate, all of the things that have happened in the last 10 years have really made us more sensitive and in tune with like what life is. And the arts have always been like art and English literature have always been like classes where you learn life lessons, not just the art lessons. So like you might be teaching someone something about typography, but you're also teaching someone about the experience of reading and the experience of, finding beauty in something. So these like deeper truths and elements of humanity. Um, we're coming towards the end. I was
Okay.
wondering if I could ask two questions. One is that
Mhm.
what advice would you give to, or not even advice, but like what would you tell your younger self from high school about the journey you've had up until this point? And then what advice would you like to give um, young designers just starting out?
Let's see. The advice that I would give my younger self is fail more and fail better. Also, you're non-binary. So just start thinking about that. Because the way that you come out is going to be wild.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as advice that I would give to like anyone else, I think it goes back to that Ira Glass quote, Like if you look at the things that you're making and you're not happy with them, that's okay and that's good. That just means that you have to practice. And it's a lot easier to practice with your hands than like teach yourself how to look at things, although it is also just as important, if not more so, to like teach yourself how to look at things. So interact with art, make art, fail more, fail harder, fail better, Daft Punk, and just let yourself be okay feeling critical about your work because it's so important to be able to, as much as you should feel confident about your practice, also be able to like analyze it and understand it and know where it's coming from and use those as leverages to improve instead of like things that you feel awkward about presenting.
Wow. Okay. That's great. I wish that could be the end quote, but we have a couple more minutes. So I
Oh,
want to
shoot.
say two follow-up questions. One is how do you find ways to make yourself okay failing, like emotionally, like what do you do to prepare yourself for like an anxious or nervous situation where you're, doing something wrong or poorly? And also what do you do personally to train your eye?
I think in terms of like helping myself feel better about failing, it's one of two situations. Because part of it, I think that's a big part, is part of the reason that crits got so hard at CalArts, which is like learning to be okay with failure is kind of like a callus. You just kind of have to do it and build it up and be okay with building it up. Because ultimately it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Um, and if you feel nervous or bad about failing, like look at the stuff that you've done in the past and look at how much better your shit is now and be like, oh wait, actually, yeah, this is a good thing that's happening. Because whatever I'm doing right now that I'm sucking at, when I look back 6 months from now and I'm so much better, I'm gonna feel a lot better about the fact that I committed myself to like doing it anyway, even if I knew it wasn't gonna go as perfectly as I think it's going to. Um, that second question was about
Training your eye.
training your eye. Um, I think I was watching this interview with this actor. I don't remember who it was, but it was something about like teaching yourself how to be in character.
Yeah.
Because like when it comes to like film, it's so much about like genre, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna play a character that's like in a Western. If you only watch Westerns, you're going to play a real good Western character, and it's also going to be so boring
Yeah.
because we've already seen Western characters, and your entire experience is being informed by like something that's very narrow.
Yeah.
And when you get to stuff like art and design, which is so subjective and so much about experience and so much about how we build systems and how we communicate with each other, breadth is just as important as depth. So read books, watch movies, play video games, go on walks. Like the people that communicate the best in the world are the people that have like so many experiences to draw from, that the things that they say and the things that they do and the things that they make feel so singular and informed.
Mhm.
So be like a Renaissance person. Experiment and do crazy shit.
Damn. You answered every question without pausing at all. I have no idea how you did it. None of these questions were prepared. So you just nailed every single
And we
one.
still have 2 minutes left.
We still have 2 minutes left.
I don't know. You want to just kick it for 2 minutes?
Yeah, let's do that. It's been great to have you on the show. You're one of the people I was I mean, I'm no offense to the other people I've interviewed, but you were one of the people I was most excited to talk to because I know you have a passion for education and you have this sort of like long personal experience with art and design. And I think it's really interesting to hear your particular perspective on things. What are you most excited for the next 5, 10 years of design for your life?
Uh, the thing that I'm most excited about. It's funny. I took a class with I took a class at CalArts, and one of the assignments was to like design a little poster about your 5-year plan.
Ugh, I hated that.
Um, yeah, it was a crazy. And like, you know, people came in with like, okay, these are like the steps I'm gonna take after I graduate, and like all the things that I'm gonna do, the things that I want to go into, as far as like planning your professional career. Um, I think I I ended up coming in and I had like an 11 by 17 piece of paper that just had a big question mark on it. Um, because that's sort of my vibe right now, is that I don't know what I'm excited to do in 5 years or 10 years or 6 months. But you know, I'll do what brings me joy in the moment.
Openness is the most important thing.
Hell
And with
yeah.
that, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Of course.